What happens when one of Hollywood's toughest and most outspoken stars, Mark Wahlberg, steps into the unpredictable world of daytime television and comes face to face with one of its most controversial and unfiltered hosts, Joy Behar? At first glance, it might sound like just another celebrity appearance, another routine stop on a promotional tour designed to generate buzz, share a few laughs, and connect with fans. But what unfolded during this particular encounter was anything but ordinary. Instead, it became one of the most explosive and talked about celebrity confrontations ever captured on live television. A moment so intense that it left the studio audience stunned and sent shockwaves across social media platforms. Almost instantly, you're about to witness a clash of personalities that seemed almost inevitable in hindsight. On one side, there was Mark Wahlberg, an actor widely recognized not just for his performances on screen, but for his strong-willed nature, direct communication style, and reputation for never backing down from a challenge. Over the years, he has built an image of resilience and toughness, someone who speaks his mind and stands firm in his beliefs, regardless of the situation. On the other side sat Joy Behar, a seasoned television host known for her sharp tongue, fearless questioning, and ability to push conversations into uncomfortable territory without hesitation. She has long been a figure who thrives on debate, often asking the kinds of questions that others might avoid, fully aware that those moments can spark the most compelling and sometimes controversial television. When these two personalities met on the set of The View, the stage was set for something far more intense than anyone had anticipated. What was supposed to be a straightforward promotional interview quickly began to shift in tone. The early moments followed the expected script-light banter, a few jokes, and some discussion about Mark's latest project. The audience was relaxed, the hosts were engaged, and everything seemed to be moving along smoothly. But beneath that surface-level calm, there was a subtle tension building, almost as if both sides were waiting for the conversation to turn. It didn't take long for that shift to happen. Questions seemingly simple at first introduced a more serious undertone, steering the discussion away from safe topics and into more personal or potentially controversial territory. Mark's demeanor began to change, his responses growing more measured and direct. Joy, sensing the shift, pressed further, leaning into the moment with the kind of persistence that has defined her career. What followed was a back-and-forth exchange that quickly escalated from polite disagreement into a heated verbal showdown. The energy in the studio changed almost instantly. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence as the audience realized they were witnessing something unscripted and unpredictable. Cameras continued to roll, capturing every glance, every pause, and every word as the tension between the two intensified. Mark Wahlberg, staying true to his reputation, refused to back down, responding with a firmness that made it clear he wasn't willing to let the line of questioning go unchallenged. Joy Behar, equally unwavering, held her ground, continuing to push and probe, determined to see the conversation through. As the exchange grew more intense, the rest of the panel appeared caught off guard, unsure of how to intervene or redirect the conversation. The moment had taken on a life of its own, moving beyond the boundaries of a typical talk show segment and into something far more raw and unpredictable. 8. For viewers at home, it was the kind of television that is impossible to look away from unfiltered. Emotionally charged and completely real. Within minutes of airing, clips of the confrontation began circulating online. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, debates, and countless interpretations of what had just taken place. Some viewers praised Mark Wahlberg for standing his ground, viewing his responses as a justified reaction to aggressive questioning. Others sided with Joy Behar, arguing that tough questions are part of the job and that public figures should be prepared to face them, regardless of where people stood. One thing was undeniable. This moment had captured the attention of millions. But before we dive deeper into every detail of this unforgettable clash, the exact question that sparked the tension, the reactions from the hosts and audience, and the aftermath that followed, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. What do you think really triggered this explosive confrontation? Is it inevitable given the personalities involved, Or did something specific push things over the edge? Stay with us, because what happened next only intensified the drama and turned this already heated exchange into a moment that would be talked about for a long time to come. This story is about to take a dramatic turn, one that no one in that studio could have fully predicted. The morning began like countless others at the studios of The View in the heart of New York City. The atmosphere was calm, professional, and routine. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, setting up cameras, adjusting lighting, and preparing for another live broadcast that, on the surface, seemed no different from any other. Mark Wahlberg arrived earlier than scheduled, a habit that reflected his disciplined and focused personality. He walked into the building with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this countless times before, according to his publicist. This appearance was supposed to be simple, just a straightforward interview centered around promoting his latest action thriller. There were no warnings, no red flags, nothing to suggest that anything out of the ordinary would take place. For Mark, this was just another stop on a long promotional tour, one of many interviews designed to generate excitement and connect with audiences. Having participated in hundreds of media appearances throughout his career, he had developed a rhythm and understanding of how these interviews typically unfold. He expected light conversation, a few predictable questions about his role, perhaps some behind-the-scenes stories, and a chance to showcase his personality. In his mind, this was going to be an easy segment, controlled, professional, and over. Before he even had time to think twice about it, the Boston native settled into the green room, a quiet space tucked away from the noise of the studio floor. There, he took a moment to center himself, sipping on a protein shake as part of his strict routine. Even in these brief pauses, his commitment to discipline was evident. Around him, members of his team reviewed talking points, going over key messages they wanted to highlight during the interview. They discussed which aspects of the film to emphasize, which stories might resonate most with viewers, and how to keep the conversation engaging without straying too far from the promotional focus. There was a sense of control in that room, a belief that everything was planned, prepared, and under control. Nothing about the situation suggested that it would become anything more than a standard television appearance at the same time. Elsewhere in the studio, Joy Behar was preparing. In her own familiar way, seated at the table or just behind the scenes, she carefully reviewed her notes and research, flipping through pages with a focused expression. Unlike many hosts who rely solely on surface-level questions, Joy had built a reputation for digging deeper, for asking the kinds of questions that could catch guests off guard. She wasn't just preparing to fill time, she was preparing to challenge, to probe, and to create moments that would stand out. Her preparation was methodical. She revisited past interviews, scanned headlines, and looked for angles that might lead to a more compelling conversation. There was an intensity to her process, a sense that she wasn't satisfied with keeping things safe or predictable. While the rest of the show might lean into lighthearted entertainment, Joy often aimed for something more, something that could spark discussion, even if it meant stepping into uncomfortable territory. At that point, these two very different approaches were moving toward a collision that no one had fully anticipated. On one side, Mark Wahlberg, expecting a smooth and controlled interview. On the other, Joy Behar, preparing to push beyond the usual boundaries of daytime television conversation. Everything about the morning felt routine, almost deceptively calm, but beneath that surface, the conditions for something far more intense were quietly coming together. What seemed like just another day at The View was, in reality, the beginning of a moment that would soon spiral into one of the most talked-about confrontations the show had ever seen. She sat quietly at the table, her notes spread out in front of her, carefully reviewing every line she had written. This was not just another routine interview for her, it was an opportunity to dig deeper, to challenge and to bring out answers that most people would hesitate to ask for. As she adjusted her papers and read through her questions once more, she mentally rehearsed how the conversation might unfold. Each question had been crafted with precision, designed not only to inform, but to provoke thought, to create tension, perhaps even to reveal something unexpected. Her reputation had not been built overnight. Over the years, she had become known for her sharp tongue, her quick wit, and her fearless approach to sensitive topics. While others often chose to play it safe, sticking to comfortable and predictable conversations, she had made a name for herself by stepping into uncomfortable territory. She understood that audiences were not just looking for surface-level discussions. They wanted authenticity, honesty, and sometimes even confrontation. That understanding had shaped her entire career. She believed strongly in holding people accountable, especially those in the public eye. For her, interviews were not just about promoting movies or projects. They were about uncovering perspectives, challenging narratives, and sometimes exposing contradictions. This mindset was exactly why she was preparing so intensely for this particular guest. She knew that he had recently made comments about the inner workings of the entertainment industry, comments that had stirred discussion and, in some circles, controversy. Many interviewers had avoided pressing him on those remarks, choosing instead to keep things light and promotional. But she had no intention of doing the same. As she reviewed her notes, she thought about how to approach the subject without losing control of the conversation. There was a fine balance between being assertive and being confrontational. She wanted to push him, but she also needed to keep him engaged enough to respond honestly. Timing would be everything: when to lean in, when to pause, and when to follow up. She underlined certain phrases, circled key points, and added small reminders in the margins, ensuring she wouldn't miss any opportunity to steer the discussion where she wanted it to go. Meanwhile, the studio around her was beginning to come alive with its usual energy. Crew members moved quickly but efficiently, adjusting lights, checking microphones, and coordinating last-minute details. The familiar buzz of preparation filled the air, a mixture of controlled chaos and practiced routine. For the production team, this was just another debut for her. The stakes felt higher. Her co-hosts gradually took their places, settling into their seats with a sense of familiarity that came from years of working together. They exchanged casual greetings, small smiles, and brief conversations, creating a relaxed atmosphere on the surface. Each of them had their own style, their own approach to interviews, and their own role within the group dynamic. Some preferred to keep things light and conversational, adding humor and warmth to the discussion. Others leaned toward thoughtful commentary, offering measured perspectives. Together, they formed a balanced panel that audiences had come to recognize and expect. Despite the outward calm, there was an unspoken awareness among them that this interview might be different. They had all heard about the recent remarks, and they knew the potential for tension. Still, they trusted the flow of the show and their ability to adapt in the moment. Years of live television had taught them how to handle surprises, how to read the room, and how to support one another if things became uncomfortable. As the final minutes ticked down, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The casual chatter quieted, replaced by a more focused energy. Producers gave final instructions through headsets. Cameras were positioned precisely, and the countdown began. The bright studio lights intensified, casting a polished glow over the set. Everything was now in place. She took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and placed her notes neatly in front of her. Outwardly, she appeared calm and composed, but internally, her mind was sharp and alert, ready to respond to whatever direction the conversation might take. She reminded herself of her goal: not just to ask questions, but to create a moment that people would remember. Across the set, her co-hosts mirrored that same readiness in their own ways. Some adjusted their seating, others glanced briefly at their cue cards, while a few simply focused on the cameras ahead. Each of them understood the rhythm of what was about to begin. The studio audience settled into silence, anticipation hanging in the air. The familiar opening cues signaled that the show was about to go live. In just moments, what had been preparation and planning would turn into real-time conversation. Unpredictable and unscripted. For her, this was the moment she thrived, in the intersection of preparation and spontaneity, where anything could happen. And as the cameras prepared to roll, she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to hold back. The atmosphere inside the studio felt completely routine, almost deceptively calm, as if nothing unusual was about to unfold. Behind the scenes, Producers had already briefed everyone involved, hosts, crew members, and even the guest team, that this would be a standard celebrity interview. Focus, they emphasized, would remain on promoting the latest film and highlighting upcoming projects. There was no indication of tension, no warning signs of conflict, just another polished segment designed to entertain viewers and keep the conversation light. From the audience's perspective, everything appeared perfectly normal. They had taken their seats expecting the usual blend of humor, casual banter, and promotional talk. No one in the room had any idea that they were on the verge of witnessing a moment that could soon ripple across social media and become a defining piece of television drama. As the countdown reached 0 and the cameras went live, Joy Behar leaned forward slightly, her expression bright and welcoming. She introduced Mark Wahlberg with her trademark enthusiasm, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. To most viewers, her tone sounded completely natural, warm, engaging, and professional. Those who were more familiar with her style, or those who had watched her closely over the years, might have detected something just beneath the surface. There was a faint sharpness, a subtle edge woven into her delivery, almost like a hint of something unsaid waiting for the right moment to emerge. Then, right on cue, Mark Wahlberg stepped onto the stage. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from decades in the spotlight. His posture was relaxed, yet commanding, his movements smooth and self-assured. As he walked out, he greeted the audience with an easy wave, his signature smile lighting up his face. The crowd responded instantly, applauding and cheering, feeding off his energy. To them, he was exactly what they expected, a charismatic Hollywood star, completely in control of the moment. There was no sign that anything was off. No hesitation, no uncertainty. If anything, Wahlberg seemed entirely at ease, as though this appearance would be just another stop on a long promotional tour. After all, he had done countless interviews before. He knew the rhythm, the pacing, the kind of questions that typically came his way. In his mind, this was likely just another opportunity to promote his work, share a few behind-the-scenes stories, connect with fans. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the conversation was quietly being set up. To shift in a very different direction, the first few minutes unfolded exactly as expected. Joy began with safe, familiar territory, asking about the film in a way that felt both natural and inviting. Wahlberg responded smoothly, almost effortlessly, delivering answers that were clearly well-prepared but still engaging. He spoke about the intense stunts he had performed, describing the physical challenges and the adrenaline that came with them. He praised the director, highlighting their vision and leadership on set, and shared a few light anecdotes that drew laughter from the audience. Everything about the exchange felt polished and controlled. It was the kind of interaction viewers had seen countless times before: a celebrity promoting a project, a host guiding the conversation, and an audience enjoying the easy flow of entertainment. Wahlberg leaned into the rhythm comfortably, expanding on his answers just enough to sound genuine, while staying firmly within the boundaries of what had likely been discussed with his team beforehand. He talked about what audiences could expect from the movie: the action, the emotional moments, the elements that would keep viewers on the edge of their seats. His tone was confident, his delivery smooth, and his expressions carefully balanced between enthusiasm and professionalism. To anyone watching, it seemed like everything was going exactly according to plan. But beneath that surface, something was slowly building. Joy listened, nodding at the right moments, occasionally interjecting with brief comments that kept the conversation flowing. Yet there was a certain focus in her eyes, a kind of calculated patience. She wasn't just listening, she was waiting. Waiting for the right opening, the right transition, the right moment to steer the discussion away from its safe path. The audience, however, remained completely unaware. They were engaged, entertained, and relaxed, with no reason to suspect that the tone of the interview might soon change. The co-hosts sat alongside Joy, appearing just as composed, contributing lightly and maintaining the balance of the segment. On the surface, it was a perfectly executed start, but in reality, it was only the calm before something far more intense. Because while Wahlberg continued to answer questions about his film, believing he was navigating familiar territory. The stage was quietly being set for a shift one that would catch him completely off guard and transform what began as a routine interview into something far more unforgettable.